What's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's Podcast. My name is Brian Brosi. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Keoni Tita. Keoni, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I was just thinking about last night and a few days ago how a lot of people look at the human body and think, man, there must be a God. It's absolutely perfect creation, right? And look at how the universe fits and is put together, and we see how everything kind of runs like a clock, and we think, wow, there has to be some type of supernatural force that is putting all this together. And perhaps that is true. But I always go back to, when I look at the human body and think about, well, what are some things that help explain our ancestral past from an evolutionary perspective? And so whether there's a creator involved with that or not, it's one thing. But to say we're the pinnacle of perfection is really not true when you actually start going down and looking at the human body, and you can see how we evolve. So I really want to just talk about that because I find it fascinating. We have all this vestigial, stuff on our body that is just really like little tokens from our past that we can really trace back. And so I just find this type of stuff just fascinating. And what's really fascinating also, did you guys have an embryology class in PT school? Well, all right. So most medical students have an embryology class, but it's really funny. Like if you look at the human from the time of conception all the way up to birth, especially in the early stages, you can look at the human and actually there's videos online and how it's almost like a condensed form of going through evolution, briefly characterized. You can see us, at one point in the embryological stage, we look like a fish. We have a tail. We look like, we look very similar to a mouse embryo. It just goes on and on and on, and you can see the different stages, which I just find that's absolutely fascinating to me. Yeah. And we've all heard of people that have been like born and have you can see their coccyx bone is more prominent. They have more of a tail, so to speak. But anyway, that's what I want to talk about today, just because I find it fascinating. I think it will help people kind of understand what a lot of our body parts are used for or had been used for in our ancient past.
Yeah, we certainly have a bunch of remnants all around us.
Yeah. And here's the other thing I don't think a lot of people know is I think it was like I don't know when it was discovered. Maybe it was a few decades ago. But anyway, our closest ancestors are the great apes, right? Mm-hmm. So we're talking about chimpanzees, orangutans, gorillas, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And what we found, like one of the things that really helps prove that is, we have 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs, and the great apes have 48. And our chromosome 2 seems to be a mixed matching of the extra chromosomes from the great apes. So basically, somewhere in our ancient past, 2 of their chromosomes kind of melded with our chromosome 2, and you can see the exact identical sequences of those extra chromosomes. So that's fascinating to me to see that. And that's chromosome 2. So it's kind of like, there's so many other things that prove evolution, but that's like pretty telling,
So you're saying it's the like genetic code for that chromosome 2 is very similar to 2 different types of great apes?
Well, that is very similar to the sequence of 2 other chromosomes of the great apes. So somewhere our common ancestor, as we split off, 2 of those chromosomes from the great apes kind of mended or combined to help create extra length of our chromosome 2. And then when you look at these certain sequences, they're identical to these other 2 chromosomes on the great apes. So it's kind of like, proof of a common ancestor that alone.
Right. Yeah.
So
what are some of those things left over then?
All right. So, well, let's talk about, we already talked about the coccyx, right? Okay. That's a vestigial tail. So what does a coccyx bone do besides for some people get inflamed and give you coccydynia? It's one of those things that really doesn't have a function, and it could create a lot of pain for people, especially if you break it or it's pointing the other way and not curved off the tip of the sacrum.
Yeah, it can certainly be painful. It is going to anchor all your pelvic floor muscles. Mm-hmm. So there's levator ani and all those things we talked about with on our pelvic health podcast. Yep. All those muscles are going to come and attach to your coccyx.
So probably, if we went on with this, probably what we'd see is we would see something like that probably going away and those muscles attaching more to the sacrum, where it seems to be becoming like more one bone anyway.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
That's one thing. The other thing is
it certainly does look like a remnant of the tail. There's no doubt about it.
Right. I find this fascinating too. There's some research that shows that our brains are actually quite a bit smaller than they were 10,000 to 20,000 years ago. That's like very, very quick. I mean, 10 to 20,000 years ago, our ancestors were human. They were definitely human, but it seems to be that they had bigger brains than us. And it also seems that our brains have shrunk from 1,500 cubic centimeters to 1,350 cubic centimeters. That's it. That's the equivalent of taking a tennis ball size scoop of brain out.
That's interesting to me.
So, what does that mean? Does that mean we all just got more dumb? Probably not. It just probably means that, we're utilizing space better, and, we have more folds to our brain or something like that. It's just more efficient. It's a more efficient brain, perhaps. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. That's only like 10,000 to 20,000 years ago. I mean, that's crazy.
Well, I mean, that is when the Earth started, Keoni, 10,000 years ago. Yeah, that is crazy. That's not long.
It's not long at all, considering, from an evolutionary perspective, we've been on humans, the people that look like us have been on this planet for at least 200,000 years ago, probably more like 300,000 years, Mm-hmm. So that's not long in evolutionary time at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, Keoni, but what type of time frame do you have any idea of, like, the time frame of evolution, like when we became Homo sapien from Homo erectus and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I have a little. Yeah, I'm not certainly no expert on it, but it seems like we as Homo sapiens, we seem to have started walking this planet probably 200 to 300,000 years ago. We seem to, and these numbers are not actually correct, but based on when we split off from our common ancestor, one lineage going to the great apes, right, and one lineage going towards, the Homo species, which is us. That was, I think they're saying, like close to 1.5 million years ago, 2 million years ago, something like that.
Okay. So we've been the human species for 300,000 years or so.
We've been in the Homo genus for.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Gotcha.
So you can't say that when we split off that, those ancestors, when they split off, look like us. No, they would have looked just like whatever the ancestor of the great apes look like.
Sure. Okay. Gotcha.
I mean, it's such a gradual process. You would not see overnight, a great ape giving birth to me, what looks like a human
wearing glasses with AirPods in.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right. So it doesn't work like that. It's a very gradual change that has, somewhat environmental pressure on it. And, just to explain evolution, because I don't think a lot of people know this, or at least they can't, they certainly can't say in somewhat of a intelligent way, because I don't think people really understand it. But evolution is a very gradual process, and in general, it's based on random mutations. So you always hear these things about, well, if it's random, that's like saying that a tornado will go through a junkyard and then, all of a sudden assemble a 747, perfect, and that's an argument. Well, and that's an argument for creationism, but again, that's not the way it works. It works by a very gradual process. And you think about getting random mutations, and the mutations that seem to work in that environment are the ones that promote the species along. There's where that pressure comes in.
Yep.
But it's still random. So for example, our ancient ancestors, even before we split off, had a third membrane. Do you ever see like reptiles that have like this third membrane, like that they can cover their eyes with?
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Sort of, as far as covering the eyes.
Yeah, so they have like regular eyelids like we have, but they also have what's called, I guess you call it a nictating membrane that goes sideways across their eyes like this. Well, if you go look in the mirror, you see a remnant of this in the corner of your eye, a little bit of bundle of tissue right in the corner of your eye. We used to have this eyelid. Well, it doesn't serve any purpose for us anymore, so we don't have that, but you can still see the vestigial remnant of that, which is fascinating. And if we go even further back, let's talk about the ear bones, like the ossicles. Do you guys study the ear bones in PT
We do.
school a little
We
bit?
do.
Yeah. Well, from an evolutionary perspective, these bones are just part of your jaw. Back in the days of being, our common ancestors, more like fish or reptiles. And so what happened as we evolved, these bones moved up into our head and created a structure for us to hear stuff. So you have, the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, and the malleus is like attached to your membrane, your eardrum, and vibrates and gives you hearing. But these things you can look from an perspective and you can see the commonality of the structure and how they fit into the jaw of many ancient species.
Yeah.
So that remnant just that fascinates me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Fascinates me.
Same with the what's the eye thing called, Keoni?
I think it's called the third eyelid, or it's called a nictating membrane. You see this on some animals, especially like some reptiles, like lizards and stuff, where they have like a third eyelid that will draw across, or a lot of animals, I think, like that swim and all, it's almost like a clear membrane that still allows them to see a little bit.
Yeah, those would be awesome. We should bring those back.
Yeah.
Go walk through a rainstorm, no problem.
Right. Yeah. Another very interesting thing from our ancient ancestors is all great apes and monkeys and stuff have a very developed muscle called Palmaris Longus. Humans don't have it. In fact, about, I think, 10 to 20% of people, humans do, a lot of humans do have it, but about 10 to 20% don't. Yep. And if you take your thumb and touch your pinky, a lot of times you'll see a tendon pop up that's attached to your thumb. Well, some people don't have that. Well, that muscle, what they say, is used for helping our ancient ancestors or monkeys and great apes to swing from trees and get a better grip. That's Palmaris Longus, which is really, that it's a fascinating muscle because some people don't even have it anymore.
It's really strange because it goes down in that inside of your forearm, like Keoni just explained that little test, and it just attaches kind of like to the fascia in the middle of your palm. So it is a little unique. But if you do have one, good news for you is it's typically used in surgery. That's the one that they typically use and transfer over.
So does it give you more dexterity? Is that what you're saying?
If you have it in your hand,
that
would be hard for me to say.
Well, I would think it would. If it was used by our ancient ancestors to be able to grip better, and
as an inference, you would imagine.
Yeah.
An extra muscle gives you a little bit extra power, right, I guess.
Right. Another thing in the head that we find is, what the hell happened to our wisdom teeth? Why are we pulling them out? Well, that has a lot to do with, our ancient diet and now what we eat now. We have we still have, our bite strength is pretty good, but not compared to the great apes or any other monkeys.
Yeah.
And, if you have a plant-based diet, very high fibrous food, you really want those third molars, your wisdom teeth, to help you chew. And since we cook food and, prepared ourselves and pre-digested ourselves, over time, what's happening is that's a selective pressure for not having to use our wisdom teeth anymore. So our jaws have narrowed. Have you gotten your wisdom teeth removed?
I did recently too.
See, I haven't, and mine are impacted. So they're telling me at this age, close to 50, to get your wisdom teeth. And I'm like, oh my, I don't even want to go through that. But you can see on my x-ray, my wisdom teeth are coming in at, can't come in. There's no room in my mouth. And that's thanks to, our evolutionary.
And you don't feel any pressure or anything, Keoni?
Well, sometimes I do.
That's why I had to get them removed.
Sometimes I do, because what happens is, and I have some who partially erupted. So what happens is, by eating, sometimes it can create infections. And I'm telling you, once a year, I get bad tooth pain from those freaking wisdom teeth. So yeah, it's going to get to the point where I'm going to be like, get them out, And so my dentist is like, you need to get them out.
Evolutionary, or whatever, the evolutionary component of us previously had all those wisdom teeth exposed, or they would lose teeth due to their fiber diet?
We had those teeth were absolutely necessary for us. Those teeth were exposed. And we had much wider jaws to help those wisdom teeth erupt.
Okay.
Which allowed us to chew up plant-based foods better and help us pre-digest better and stuff like that. Now we don't need it. And so what's happening is they're not erupting. And for a lot of us, they're creating headaches. So, I hear these things out there. Well, dentists are just trying to make money from wisdom teeth. No, the dentists are basically pulling them out because evolution is such a way that it won't allow them to erupt anymore for most people. There are some people where they erupt and they do just fine, but a lot of people like myself, they don't.
Yeah.
And they can cause problems, big problems later on in life.
Yeah.
And if you don't get them out young, it's just more of a pain to get them out when you're old because they're really anchored in there, you know? So that's kind of my apprehension about going.
Yeah. It's not a fun recovery either.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody wants to have surgery like that. I just imagine, somebody in there yanking, cutting out part of my jawbone to get them out, but anyway.
They were putting me under and they were like, okay, so we're going to go for they just said something incorrectly right before they put me under just to freak me out. Yeah. It was like, all right, so you're here for the root canal? And then I was like, wait.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of digestion though, there are some other remnants in our digestive tract that we no longer need. One of them really, or it seems like they're not, I shouldn't say we don't need. I mean, they do have some function, but they're vestigial. They were more important early in our evolutionary history. And that's the cecum and that's the appendix. So, the small intestine comes down, and the small intestine attaches to the ileocecal valve, and right below that valve, you get the cecum and the appendix, right? So basically the cecum is basically a reservoir for microbes and gut bacteria and stuff like that. But our evolutionary past, we had what appears to be a much longer digestive tract to help us break down fibrous food better and more efficiently and to extract energy out of it. Right. And that's the cecum and the appendix. And again, a lot of people have problems with their appendix, right? I mean, the appendix, I would say at this point, what we know about it, it's not something that's a useless structure, but it's one of those things that we certainly can live without, and you want it out if it's inflamed, and it's prone to that. And I've had a number of patients where I had to refer them because that's exactly what was going on with them. They had appendicitis and it needed to come out. It was really, really inflamed. And you do not want any part of your intestine rupturing. That's a serious life-threatening thing. Absolutely. That goes on. Here's another interesting one. You ever see a cat or any animal get afraid and how they poof up? Their hair kind of poofs up.
Yeah.
And they, and part of the reason for that is to make themselves look bigger or maybe more intimidating to whatever's threatening them.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we kind of do that. Some humans try to do that by puffing out their chest or whatever if they're getting to a fight. But we actually still have remnants of little muscles in our hair follicles that will make our hair go erect. And those are what called goosebumps. So these are the same things that animals use to puff themselves up, even though now we'll get them when we get cold or whatever. But these are just remnants from our evolutionary past. The erector pili muscles, they're called. Yeah. What else? we already talked about the coccyx, but then another muscle that's a remnant is, if you ever watch your dog or cat or any animal, you'll see that their ears kind of look like satellites when they're like listening to you, like they can focus, right? Well, we have these muscles too, but they're not nearly as developed as our canine and feline friends. And but in our ancient past, they definitely were. And there are some humans that can still wiggle their ears. Those are those muscles, but they're certainly not like satellites where they can like focus on sound and do all this type of stuff. And those are the auricular muscles, and they control the visual part of the ear. But most mammals can do that. And then getting back to the scientific name of that third eyelid, now that I see it, it's called plica semiluminaris.
There it is. Yeah.
I think it's also known as a nictating membrane in birds and reptiles and such. So for us men, one of the things that's an evolutionary remnant are the male nipples. Like, why the hell do we have those? And the reason why we do have those is because early in our embryological history, we did not have a gender. We were basically developing as women until the environment changed with more testosterone and stuff. Well, we were developing nipples at that time, and so we have remnants of the nipples, male nipples. Those are slowly going away on men, but it's basically being in the very early on in the womb and the environment. It's basically a remnant of our female past, Brian.
All right, deal.
And then there's some very interesting things like the subclavius muscle. Are you familiar with this muscle?
I am familiar with this muscle. Absolutely.
This muscle seems to be more useful for animals that walk on all four limbs. Anyway, it's the muscle, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a little band of muscle that's right under the clavicle, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of, I guess, helps move the clavicle a little bit or something. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's going to control the shoulder girdle and help elevate the clavicle a little bit and just be involved in those.
So this muscle is highly developed, or much more developed in animals that walk on all fours.
Yeah, super small muscle.
Yeah.
Super small, right under your clavicle. It is involved. But yeah, I could definitely see how it would be more useful in someone walking on all fours. I think of the articularis genus. That's a muscle that's on the femur, Keoni. And it's a super small muscle. When you
I don't even know that. I've never even heard of that muscle, I don't think.
The way I became familiar with it is we opened up a cadaver, and there's like a small sliver of muscle right on the anterior part of the femur above the knee. It doesn't go anywhere. It's sitting right on the femur. It doesn't cross any joint. And what it does now is help pull the fat pad up essentially, so it doesn't get impinged during extension of your knee. So when you straighten out your knee. Wow. But it's literally a muscle that crosses no joint. We were cutting through cadavers. I saw this muscle is not going from any bone to another bone. And I was like, what the hell is that
Does
for?
Everybody have one?
From what I know, everyone does have one, from what I know. But it wasn't even a muscle like an anatomy where we get a list of stuff that we have to know. It wasn't even on that list. So it's significantly
and it's called the what's it called again?
Articularis genus.
Wow, okay, that's cool. That's really cool. Some people have extra ribs, right? So these tend to be vestigial too in our evolutionary history. Some people have an additional set of ribs, about 8%, a 13th rib that kind of comes off of their spine.
Do you know in these cases, Keoni, if it's typically higher or lower?
It's both. Rib? It's actually both. So some people have an extra neck rib, which sits on top of the rib cage. And then some people have a 13th rib that sits below the rib cage, what we'd call the conventional, the stereotypical rib cage. Oof. And a lot of this has to do with, I think, from our ancient evolutionary history where, many animals, I'm guessing, many animals needed more ribs to protect especially when you're walking on all fours, to protect the internal organs. Yeah. Now that we walk upright, we don't need them as much. So they seem to be vestigial also. But let's talk about some things that a lot of people don't really know, but I think kind of hints to kind of a quickening of evolution, and then just body parts that are just weird. But first of all, skin color. Really, skin color is very interesting, and it's a fairly recent evolutionary thing. I forget when, like, they found like some ancient human in England and did some DNA analysis, and I think that what they found, the person was like 8,000 years old, maybe it's 5,000 years old. This person is England, but they did a DNA analysis and all that, and somehow they were able to find out that their skin color was actually dark. And that's pretty crazy, being in England, which is crowded. You don't get a lot of sunlight, because we know skin color is just, basically a reaction to sunlight. And over time, right, you create this, light skin color around the equator gets selected out for. I mean, you don't want to have light skin and live in the equator and not have any clothes to protect yourself or anything like that. Eventually, you're going to get deselected, so to speak. And you're going to have a selection for dark skin. That's why as you get close to the equator, you see humans with, darker skin,
right,
in general. And basically it's just the melanocytes in your skin that give you this darkness. What's really interesting about this, though, is that, based on skin color, everybody has the same amount of melanocytes or thereabout, whether you're black, brown, yellow, or just white, whatever. We all have the same number of melanocytes. It's just that, somebody with darker skin is just more efficient at producing melanin than somebody who doesn't have dark skin.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is an example. Skin color is really interesting because it's an example of what we call convergent evolution, which basically means that you get similar outcomes in two or more locations. So similar evolutionary trajectories as far as skin color in two or more locations, like Sri Lankans and Polynesians basically have the same skin tone, but, are two separate groups of people who didn't,
but similar environments.
But similar environments.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing that I don't think a lot of people know, Brian, is that, is the way evolution happens, like how new species are created is basically from, being separated, populations being separated. So it's fascinating to me is I really believe we're really going to see this happen. If we ever colonize, if a group of humans colonizes Mars or the moon, I mean, if we got separated from that group of people, I would say for maybe 10 to 50,000 years, maybe even less than that, because it's a completely different environment, you're gonna see two separate freaking species, even though we have a common ancestor of humans. And that's really where we're gonna see things really get crazy.
Yeah, what do you think? What do you think would be the first big change, Keoni, between the Mars colony and us?
Well, one big change is they're gonna have to be able to cope with radiation better. Right? They're going to be exposed to radiation. So their DNA is going to have a protective mechanism unlike ours. So that's going to be one huge change.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting what happens over time to the joints as they're no longer receiving that cyclical compression, decompression. They're constantly in a state of more or less decompression.
It's going to be a little bit different. Or if we colonize a planet that has higher gravity, a little bit higher gravity than us,
the opposite.
The opposite's going to happen. You're going to see the bones and muscles probably be more developed. Hair on our head is another thing, right? What is it really used for? And for a lot of us, it's basically, I think it's like it's basically used to attract the opposite sex or whatever. It's kind of like, think about it as the peacock feathers on the human, so to speak, your hair you can think of. But really, it also acts as an insulator for us, reflects heat. And also say hair is kind of one of those things. We are losing our body hair. It's vestigial from an evolutionary perspective. If you go back, most of our ancient ancestors had full hair all over their body. And we do too. But we're losing it slowly but surely. And that has a lot to do with us, using clothes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Our ancient ancestors did not. And hair is interesting because it also allows you to detect, bugs on you and stuff like that too. Yeah. So it can prevent keep bugs out of the way, and also helps with keeping your body cool to some extent, especially on your head.
Yeah, certainly a barrier. Think of the eyelashes.
Yeah, the eyelashes are one. And eyelashes are a big one. That's a barrier. It helps clear the eyes of debris and stuff like that. And I would say eyebrows do that to some extent too. But really, I think eyebrows are more used for facial expression, conveying, communicating.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we really don't know what the eyebrows do so much. It may help clear stuff away, but our ancient ancestors, and you can see this in primates, had very prominent brow ridges, where we've lost that. So if you have a brow ridge, that's also tends to be vestigial, and we created more conspicuous eyebrows.
I wonder if that has anything to do with we need our eyebrows less to communicate now.
It may.
In the long run.
Yeah, it may, and it may. You may see selective pressure where we don't have that. But they've actually done studies, I think, with facial expressions, and I think like if shaving your eyebrows, you can't communicate to other humans as well. Like they can't get an idea of what you're actually thinking or what your emotional thing is going on at the time if you don't have eyebrows. But
yeah.
This type of stuff is fascinating, but definitely eyebrows help keep sweat out of the eyes. There's no doubt about that. Another thing that's fascinating to me, and this is if I had to design a human, I certainly wouldn't have designed it this way. But as we started walking on two legs, what happened is our head kind of moved to the middle of our neck, and with that, it allowed us to speak. And it seems like our larynx, which lies low, throat, moved down, and we put air through that to help us speak. So this gave us speech, right? The problem is, as that happened, now we have something where a tube that we breathe through, that's the same tube, at least in the beginning, that we swallow food from. So it can create a significant choking hazard. And the only thing that stops us there is a little flap of skin called the epiglottis that will flap there. And your body usually does this unconscious. But as you know, how many people a year all over the world die from choking accidents?
Yeah. I choked on a piece of quinoa this year. Had to go to the emergency room.
Yeah. And when I was young, when I was 3 years old, I was sucking on a lollipop. Luckily, my mom was there. I wouldn't be here. And that whole freaking ball of lollipop went down my windpipe. Whew. And oh yeah, and I remember that as 3, what it was like, because I remember I couldn't breathe and I was panicking, and then all of a sudden, my mom came and like slapped me, as hard as she could on the back, and the thing just popped out.
And that's why Keoni hates sugar.
That's why I hate sugar. Yeah, especially lollipops like that. But that is an evolutionary, like, you won't see these types of things happen as readily with animals that walk on all fours. They just don't have the choking hazard that we do. Being bipedal has helped us get to where we are, right? Because we can speak. It helped create language and stuff like that. Help develop our brain more. Help develop our hand dexterity to build tools and things like that. So this is probably this little evolutionary thing that happened in our history is probably one of the things that have brought us today and made us really the pinnacle of, the creative force or in animals, right? I mean, Homo sapiens means wise. I mean, yeah, we can create things because of this happening to our throat and larynx, although it creates a choking hazard, for a lot of us. and it's catastrophic and it certainly can kill you.
Yeah.
Another design flaw for humans, but again, we do it great, is when we think about hemoglobin attaching oxygen, right? It helps oxygenate our tissues. But why the hell would you then, if you're a god, design hemoglobin that binds carbon dioxide much better than oxygen? I mean, so it's a great way to kill yourself if you want to kill yourself, because you'll just go to sleep. And you hear about this, people going in their garage and running their car, and that's what happens, is that carbon dioxide attaches to hemoglobin and basically you suffocate yourself. Hemoglobin's interesting, has a neat evolutionary history too, to it where you can actually see some neat things with that. The other thing, what about that little flap of skin that hangs in the back of your throat called the uvula? That's fascinating.
Punching bag?
Yeah, the little punching bag that hangs in the back of your throat. We're not really sure what the hell that does. People can certainly live without it. It seems to help possibly with speech, maybe, but you can still talk without one perfectly fine. And it may act as a mud flap for directing food away from the nasal passages if you cough or breathe or anything like that. So it won't allow anything to go up into that. So
That's interesting.
It may help with that. For a lot of people, it's a real problematic thing because a lot of times it will swell and it can make snoring awfully loud as it flaps, as you're breathing in through your throat. So there's actually some surgeries that will remove that, especially if snoring is really, really bad. It may also help with saliva production too.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. This is one of the things that I don't know if you have this, Brian, but this happens mostly in men. As we get older, you have a nice full head of hair. Luckily, I do too. But we actually know that our colleague and my brother does not.
Hey, Jade.
He does not have a full head of hair. But as we get older, men especially, but it happens in women too, our hairlines will recede. And what is so real?
It's scary.
What is really awful is as it recedes, our ear hairs seem to be more prolific. So we get a lot of ear hair and nose hair, and we get a lot of crazy eyebrow hair too that seems to just take off. It's almost like our head hair
migrates south for the winter, for the old age,
under our skin all the way to our eyebrows and our nose and grows out like full hair out of our ears. But yeah, that's if somebody can explain to me why that happens to us, what the evolutionary reason is for that as we get older, I don't know. The other thing, as we get older, it is a fact that our ears tend to get larger as we get older, and our noses. And the reason why is a number of reasons. Is because it seems like cartilage, especially in the ear and the nose, does not stop growing your whole life, where everything else does stop growing, like your bones and everything else. And cartilage is very, very prone to gravity. So your ears hang on your head, and gravity will pull them down. So you see the older men with huge ears.
Yep.
And really big noses and things like that. It happens to be to that just reason.
Covered in hair.
Covered in hair and very large ears, large nose. Yeah,
neither of them work at that point.
and then neither of them work. And maybe that, that's really interesting. Maybe that's what's going on there. Make them bigger so you can at least hear a little bit bigger and smell a little bit better. So you can taste your food and hear a little bit better. I don't know. That may be going on. I've also heard people talk about the sinuses. In your anatomy class, the sinuses take up a ton of space in your head. And we're not really sure what the hell they do. They may, they just seem to be pockets that take up space in your head, or maybe they're pockets in your head that just make your head lighter or something. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, they can get infected too. Mm-hmm. They may help with voice, and vibration and things like that. But we have a whole lot of sinuses that possibly could be used for more brain space, in our head.
Right.
That we're not really sure what they do, and people can really be. I have patients come into me every year because I have another sinus congestion, headache, and they're on a round of antibiotics. So they just
those sinus infections are probably like next to the common cold.
Yeah,
one of the most common things you hear.
Right. Another vestigial thing we didn't talk about is something called Darwin's tubercle. So Darwin's tubercle. I don't know if people can see, but let me see here if I can turn my head. So Darwin's tubercle is a little pointy, little bit of flesh on your ear, like right here, that kind of sticks out. Well, in a lot of mammals, this tubercle, think about your cat or dog with their pointed ears. That tubercle is basically a vestigial thing where our ears used to be more pointed. You can feel it as you go down this helix, the outer edge of your ear, and you feel a little bump as you go down. A lot of people have. It's like a little fleshier area. It's
Uh-huh.
called Darwin's tubercle. Anyway, that is a vestigial thing from our past, where we used to have more pointed ears that were up, a little point on our ears. Think about a cat or a dog. Anyway.
Maybe we evolved from Spock.
Yeah, that's
There you
exactly
go.
right. Yep, that's exactly right. Anyway, Darwin's tubercle is another one, which is very, very fascinating. Tonsils, we've heard about tonsils, how they can give people a lot of problems. Tonsils are part of your immune system. A lot of people have had them removed because they
I've
get
had mine
swollen.
removed.
You have?
Yep.
And yeah, a lot of them get infected and, can make swallowing and breathing difficult. And they do serve somewhat of a function, but they definitely are not necessary, as we can tell by you. So you don't have your tonsils, and a lot of people don't need them, and they can be a big problem if they get infected.
Yeah.
What else? There's a muscle called the pyramidalis muscle. If you're familiar with that one, in the lower abdomen, shaped like a triangle.
That one I'm not so familiar with, no.
Some people have it, some people don't. Some people have two of them. They from what I understand, it helps contract the linea alba. I think that's, yeah. But it's like about 20% of people don't actually have it, so it seems to be vestigial also.
Oh, I'll have to look that up. So the linea alba can separate and cause diastasis recti, which is where people may
Right.
have heard
So I was
it.
thinking about that. Right. Yeah. I was. Yes, that's exactly right. Which is a bigger problem. A big problem with some pregnant women, right?
Postpartum women, and then really, from what I know, the most common is older males.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because we get all loosey goosey and.
So that's where you see that. That's where you see like the abdominal hernias and stuff.
Not necessarily a hernia, but like if someone, and you see it often in old guys where it's like they just come from a supine, like a laying down position and sit up, you get just this huge protruding pouch in their belly.
I see. Okay.
And that would be a little bit more like that.
Got it. Okay.
I'm not sure it's relation to hernias, but I mean, that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think if it's weak there, you can certainly get hernias there.
Yeah, it certainly makes sense. It's like a piece of connective tissue that basically holds you down the middle in the front.
Right.
Less.
Right. One of the things that always fascinates me when you read any book on evolution, or you see any debate between creationism and evolution, a lot of creationists will hold up the eye as like the pinnacle of like proof of a creator.
Perfect creation. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you look at the eye and how it was designed, you're like, yeah, the designer could have done better. And the reason why I say that, if there's
it's a little frail to begin with.
Well, yeah, and as far as designs go, it's really just not the best design. And the example I give for this is you have the optic nerve coming right through the middle of it, which gives you a blind spot.
Yeah.
And we don't notice this because our brain just fills in the blind spots in general. But yeah, it creates a blind spot going right through what would you call that? I guess the retina in the back. But anyway, so the optic nerve comes through there. But yeah, the eye is a very interesting thing. And the evolutionary history of the eye, if you ever read about it, it's very fascinating how they trace the development of the eye in different animals, aquatic animals and stuff like that, to humans and so on. It's a fascinating thing. And really it's I guess from a early on in our evolutionary history, basically it sensed light, it's just a light sensor. So in very simple, what we call simple species, you either move towards the light or move away from the light. That's a simple eye, so to speak.
Right.
But the eye is fascinating, and many, especially birds and other mammals, have much better, sense of sight and can see a much wider spectrum of color than we can see.
Yeah.
I think. Is there anything else you could think of? Oh, here's a curious thing. Do you know that your liver can generate? If you remove 2/3 of it, a healthy liver can regenerate itself.
By its own, like in your own body.
Oh yeah, you can remove almost 2/3 of your liver and your liver will grow back, especially if it's healthy. It won't come back looking perfect like it did, but it will grow back and be completely functional. It's one of the few organs that can do that.
That is
I think
nuts.
it is
No, I
the
had no
only
idea.
organ that can do that. And we're not really sure why that is. I mean, it's a very important organ, but we're not really sure why that is. I mean,
Yeah, strange.
your brain can't do that. No other organ can do. Your heart certainly can't do that. It'd be nice if our heart could, because most of us die of, heart problems. But
Yeah, that is strange. I didn't know that.
yeah, that's crazy to me. Another thing, this is just is kind of late in our evolutionary history, is I think I've seen you eat dairy products, right? Do dairy products mess with you at all?
No, not really.
Yeah, they don't bother me either. And basically, people of mostly European descent, based on using livestock and drinking milk quite a bit into adulthood, we've developed enzymes that can digest milk, whereas you'll see a lot of people from around the Mediterranean area or Asians, or people of African descent who just do not do well with milk. Although some will, but some won't, and that you can trace that back. And that, I think, as far as evolutionary history, it's only like 5,000-6,000 years old where this started developing in us.
Mm-hmm.
So another interesting thing is, if we on our hands we have this opposable thumb, right?
Yeah.
That can touch all the other fingers, and again, like our throat and our larynx and stuff like that, this opposable thumb has really helped us with creating tools and things like that. Well, most primates have an opposable big toe. Well, our ancient ancestors used to, because it helped them grab onto trees and stuff like that. And if you see our toe as opposed to our thumb is kind of attached onto our hand sideways, right? Whereas our big toe, no longer, it's more straight, like the fingers are, well, it used not to be that way. It used to look almost like our foot would, our ancient ancestors used to look like a hand for grasping.
I think I would take the old toe back if I could. Sounds more useful.
Yeah. And if you look at the toes, you can really see that the toes are kind of vestigial too. Our toes are over time shrinking, and eventually we probably won't be having much of our toes. You definitely see this in our little toe, which is, they definitely help with balance and walking and stuff like that. But they seem like, with our evolutionary trajectory, that our foot will probably lose most of our toes over time.
Well, I've also heard that we've begun to lose, in some cases, the intrinsic muscles, which just means the muscles within the actual foot.
Yeah.
Due to the long history of us wearing shoes now.
Yeah.
So we've gone through huge changes in how we interact with the ground, just based off consistently and constantly having a full encasing shoe around your foot at all times.
Right.
And I mean, these things used to articulate these things. All the joints of your feet used to articulate independently and sense a variety of things. And now you strap on a big shoe, giving it a lot of proprioceptive input, and it doesn't get any sort of feedback from the ground, really, other than you may be touching the ground, but then you're getting a huge feedback from the base of the foot. And all these things are just, you see it become a problem a lot in like runners and things like that, where you have to begin to sort of retrain some of these intrinsic things of the feet, because we're losing them as we don't use them by just strapping on a pair of Nikes that's fully encompassing your entire foot.
Right. And I'll just add to that. What you're stating there is very Lamarckian, which is somewhat true. You're not actually stating that, but Lamarckian evolution, which it's very interesting, is basically like, why does a giraffe have a long neck? Well, they had to reach for a tree, so over time it created some pressure to the environment created pressure to create a long neck. Well, again, evolution at its most foundational aspect does not work like that. But basically what happened is the giraffes with the slightly longer neck were able to reach and get better nutrition. So the shorter necks got selected out for, and that's what you're describing is happening with the foot, right? Yeah. So it's about, the body wants, you think about the body wanting to be efficient. Well, if you're no longer using stuff, right, then the body over time, maybe random mutations and environmental pressure select out the things that we're not using much anymore,
Yeah. Interesting question, Keoni, that just came to my mind is, do you think in some regard we're slowing down evolution by creating such a safe environment that we live in? And because now those mutations that would happen where, the shorter neck or to take it back to the example, the shorter neck giraffe just wouldn't be able to survive as well and wouldn't reproduce and so on and so forth to create this long path of evolution. Well,
Mhm.
now we don't really ever encounter a situation ever where it's like, well, this human isn't going to make it because of XYZ. Now
Right.
we, as a society, not that's a bad thing, help keep everyone afloat.
Hmm.
And we've kind of taken that natural survival of the fittest out of
No,
our life.
Brian, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right with that. I think, yeah, I think because of our healthcare systems and better hygiene and all of that stuff, we are living longer, and most of us are are living longer. So in a sense, I agree. Like, we are kind of taking evolution out of the equation in a sense, especially here on the planet. Because the other thing is as a species, there's no separation between groups of people anymore. We're all one big population now, right? I mean, we could
Yeah.
travel anywhere in the world. We can intermingle with any group of humans anywhere. We're all one species. So without that separation, you're just not going to see humans diverge off into another species. That's just not going to happen. And then you do see evolution slowing down, at least from a biological perspective. Here's where you see it speeding up, is what's going to happen next. And we're doing this pretty much in the lab now, but in 50 years, you're going to be able to go in and change your DNA. So
Yeah.
you're going
Yeah.
to be able to go in there and be like, well, I want to put a gene in my body to make me more muscular, or to, make me better looking, or to give me longer hair, or, so and stuff. And you are going to be able to do stuff like that. And, or you insert a gene into your body that allows you to cope with radiation better. So therefore you can travel to Mars, that type of thing. And so technology, and then I really believe, with our phones, we are combining with our technology. So we are going to be the AI.
Yeah.
And this phone eventually, I think, is going to be implanted in our brain or forehead or wherever, something that doesn't look like this. But, so
What?
that's where evolution goes next. So our next evolutionary, human 2.0 is going to be, cyborg human. And that's where our evolution is going to take off from there. And if
Yeah.
we ever get separated from, which we will, when we go to other planets, humans on Earth some humans will stay here, other humans will go there. If there's not a mixing and matching of people coming and going like there is between people of cities here, you're going to see a completely different species of humanoid. And they may not even look human after millions of years because of the environment that they're in.
It's fascinating stuff.
It
Really
really
is.
is fascinating, and it's fascinating, our creation. Our true creation story is just absolutely fascinating, overwhelming, because when you look back at things, you are actually you're like, Jesus, man. Think about J.R.R. Tolkien and Middle Earth, and
Hmm.
the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Well, we actually, that was true about 100, 200, 300,000 years ago. There were many humanoid species on the planet. We see this in our DNA. Me and you, because we're of European descent, Caucasian, we have Neanderthal genes in us. So we mix and matched. Think about Neanderthals as possibly being dwarves. They kind of were stocker. They had bigger heads. They were definitely stronger than us. But somewhere in our past,
You're talking about Jade?
yes, yeah, he has a little bit more Neanderthal genes than we do. But yes, we have them in us,
Uh-huh.
And then you see Asians have some genes in them, or people from Southeast Asia have some genes, and it's from a humanoid species that we're not even sure about. We just know it existed. And
Hmm.
then you see the little hobbit-like humanoids that live down in Indonesia, that were about 3 foot tall, but only appeared to have died out only like 20,000 years ago in that little pocket.
Yeah. Fascinating.
So our story is really, really fascinating. And the thing that just is an awe-inspiring and like like, man, the earth is just fascinating is how, everything alive on this planet has DNA in us, which is proof that we are all related to every living thing on this planet, including grass and every type of bug you can think of. We all, came from the same source. But one thing I will say, a lot of people say, who's the evolutionary pinnacle, so to speak, of species? And people go, well, of course it's humans. That statement in itself is not true. If you're a species that is alive today, you are just as evolutionarily important or at the pinnacle of your evolutionary success, just as we as humans are, if you're alive today. It's the extinct animals that are not anymore.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I may counter that by saying that we can control our environment, where I have yet to see another species that can, I guess.
Well, we are smarter than that. So what is our evolutionary tool that has allowed us to do that better than anybody else? Right?
Okay.
It's our brain.
Okay.
It's our brain. But I will also say beavers control their environment too. Ants certainly can too by what they engineer and build. Things like that. But no, I get what you're saying. I mean,
fair enough.
But I would say this. I would say, as far as saying like we are the evolutionary pinnacle, that's not a true statement. Now, as far as saying we are the most intelligent, creative species and we have bigger brains and can create things and build huge buildings and things like that, that is our evolutionary tool that makes us very, very special, right?
Yeah.
But we still can't keep track of buried nuts, 30,000 of them every winter like a squirrel can. We can't do that as good as a squirrel, We can't hold our breath as well as a whale. The most we can probably do is 1 or 2 minutes, whereas a whale can be under the water for 2 hours without any problem,
Yeah.
So it's like, if we want to really define ourselves as the pinnacle by intelligence, we have to look at animals and look at what intelligence means to them based on what they have evolved to be, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't like whales and dolphins, I believe they have a bigger brain than we do.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And dolphins, I think whales and dolphins do in proportion. They're bigger. So even though they're a bigger size, they actually proportionally, I think, have bigger brains, especially dolphins, which is fascinating. But again, bigger brain does not necessarily mean intelligence. Although it very well could be with when comparing dolphins and humans. We know that dolphins have separate languages between pods. We know that they name each other. We know that they communicate in a very complex way, which we don't understand. Same with whales. So, and we know that they are very intelligent, but we also know in their own sort of way, pigs are very intelligent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We also know in a chicken sort of way that chickens have intelligence. We also know ravens or crows are extremely intelligent and our creators can create tools. So these things are fascinating stuff to really like kind of think about. And I love talking to animal researchers about that, study animal intelligence. And I'm lucky enough, I have a friend who works for a fund who gives money to animal researchers all over the world that study animal intelligence. So it's fun talking to him about, what they're studying and then they see with different animals.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing this topic. That was fascinating.
It's cool. Yeah. This stuff I love. I mean, I love that. But anyway, yeah, until next time, we'll be talking more about this stuff soon.
Bye, everyone.
Yep. Take care.